I am here with Will York, who is an immigration attorney, and today we're going to talk about the rewilding of belonging and justice and how those two things fit together. Will, where would you want to start on that?
Sure. Yeah. I thank you for having me as part of this heretic conversation today to talk about justice and belonging. So I've been practicing immigration law here in Nashville for several years now, 5 or 6 years. Prior to that, I was doing more mass tort litigation, and have had many opportunities to contemplate both what justice is and isn't, and what it means to belong. Belonging, at least to this country's formal definition of what it means to be admissible to the country or deportable from the country, which has a very long and insidious history. You know, like the philosopher Pierre Desjardins said, we only can make sense of where we are today, at least from a legal perspective, by understanding the context in which we got here. And we didn't get here through peace, love, and understanding, at least as far as our policies at the border are concerned, and who we choose to admit and deny admission to the United States for. I love the idea of rewilding because it beckons us to yearn back to the times before we had militarized borders. And even before the times where, you know, if you come onto my tribal land, I just chop your head off. Right? Even that is sort of a capitalistic construction of limited resources, and, you know, you are an interloper on my land, therefore, you know, you are jeopardizing our tribe's access to resources. Before that time, before those times, that there was another way, which was acceptance and migration as normal, and recognition of the inherent value of other humans as something to be protected and valued, even if it's not valued by some sort of formal legalistic idea. Okay. It's still, you know, recognition of the divine in another person was all it took, right? Rather than a whole set of
Dei.
Yeah. Exactly. Instead of a recognition of formal duties and obligations that we have written down in order to be either more productive or, you know, whatever the case may be as far as what justice is.
Okay.
Imago Dei is really where it all came from, right? I mean, if we were that close to our understanding of seeing the value of another person, we would not have to have the formal institutions of law, which are very separate from what justice is, at all.
Well, a few years ago, I went down to the border to get what they called a border immersion. And granted, 10 days is not a long time, but at the same time, we were on a kind of a guided tour of what was happening there, and talking with people who were in kind of a limbo. They were on the Mexican side of Nogales, and they were stuck. They couldn't go into Mexico. They couldn't come into the United States. And yet there were all these human beings in this big room. And we went in and talked to a number of them. And the stories they told about where they came from was just incredible. The notion that somebody would have to beg anybody for help under those circumstances, because a number of the women talked about not only being trafficked, but the kinds of things that were going on in their villages before they even left. Gangs running the villages, and they were literally, their lives were on the line.
Right.
So why are we not allowing people under those circumstances? Why are we not granting them asylum? Why are we not giving sanctuary to those folks?
Looks kind of dark. Oh, wow.
We came back.
Okay, we're back. So why do we not grant sanctuary to people who seemingly deserve it? Well, because our legal system has been, at least as far as immigration is concerned, constructed over the last 250 years to be a predominantly exclusionary system. And we, as the United States, barely meet our minimum international law requirements as far as providing refuge to refugees and asylum to people who are legitimately afraid to return. If you look at the asylum grant rates at the border, they're atrocious. Most deserving people don't win because our legal system is based on adversarial process, right? Whereas some countries have a more inquisitional approach to learning about whether someone would be, for example, subject to harm, torture, abuse in their country of origin. We have an adversarial process. That's what our legal system is built on in the United States. And something that we're proud of in the United States is that there's a prosecutor and a defendant, or a plaintiff and a defendant, and their learned counsel will present whatever arguments in their favor or in opposition, and the truth will emerge, will percolate up, which is not always a perfect system. Very rarely is a perfect system, I would say. These people are not represented by lawyers at the border, whereas the government is represented by full-time lawyers. So in the adversarial process, they don't have a reasonable opportunity to present their evidence of why they're afraid, why they know that they would be tortured, abused, killed, if they were returned to their country of origin. There's a lot of mistruths that are spread by the smugglers about the process, because the smugglers themselves are afraid of being brought to justice, because many times they sexually abuse and economically abuse the people that they're smuggling into the United States. And so they during the entire passage from Central America or Mexico to the U.S. border, which is obviously a very arduous and difficult path. I think one time you were telling me about how you got dehydrated once.
Oh my God, yeah.
Down there, and that was just, during your normal outing,
Yeah. We didn't go far at all, and I blacked out in the Sonoran Desert, and one of the people who was there as our guide, it's almost like I did show and tell, very unintentionally, and it was not pleasant. It was not pleasant at all.
So think about what it must be like if that's if your guide is your coyote, the person bringing you up here, and the only person who you can trust, who you think you can trust about what life is going to be like in the United States, and they tell you, this is what happens if you apply for asylum. You're going to be in detention all this time, which is now true under President Trump's zero tolerance policies. Most people applying for asylum are not released from custody, right? They're going to be sitting in jail during that time. Right. So that's a very difficult thing for people to cope with, is the idea that they will be in jail during the time in which it takes to present their case. Well,
right.
I mean, that's a pretty big deterrent as well. and the things the coyotes say about, this is what's going to happen to you. You could be abused, because they themselves are afraid of being brought to justice as human smugglers.
Yeah.
So it's multifactorial, as always, about why we don't extend to other people the Imago Dei idea, but I would posit that the biggest piece is probably racism.
Well, it was fascinating. We went to a federal courtroom in Tucson, and they had already had it's almost like speed dial. You have 8 people come up at a time, and the judge does this rote sort of speech, blah, 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 and then says to their attorney, does this person understand the charges? And it goes down the road, and we got to speak with one of the attorneys down there who said the particular judge we had that day was really a very sympathetic, compassionate human being, and that the judges had been put in a really difficult spot, being made to take their turn in sending people off to jail. And it was clear this particular judge had a heart for the people who were in front of him. And I counted, I believe, 72 people during the period that we were sitting there, and all of them being carted off, 8 by 8 by 8. And some of them had already been in the United States several times. They had already crossed over several times. And I'm thinking, if a person is willing to go through this more than one, you come through the first time and you get slammed with this, but if you're willing to come back over and over and over again, that says to me there is something very bad going on at home. We had the story of the caravan.
The migrant caravan,
yeah,
which captured the Fox News headlines for weeks, right?
Gosh.
Coming from Central America. Not news, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, it was supposed to be this monstrous group of people, bad dudes coming up through there, and the
seeking
photos,
asylum. Right?
Yeah, and what I saw was a lot of women and children, along with a number of men, but it didn't look like a scary crowd to me. And it was like this was the first time anybody had ever experienced something like this.
And the president reacts by sending in the National Guard, right?
Right.
For these women and children.
Right.
They reminded me of Moses crossing the desert with the Israelites coming out of Egypt.
The original caravan.
Yeah, not anything new.
Yeah.
Even if you look back at the statistics from those times, you don't even see a peak in the number of entries or the number of new court cases or whatever metric you want to look at as far as undocumented people entering the country. It was barely a blip on the radar. People come to the United States and seek a better life literally every hour of every day. And those are not the terrorists that we should be concerned about. They're just not. But yeah, the migrant caravan was very interesting to see so many people bent out of shape about it. When people move, people have to move, people are compelled to move to other places for safety, for security. But the thought exercise that goes through my mind, and I'm sure yours as well, is would we react this way if these migrants looked a lot more like us? Or are we treating them this way like other because they are indigenous, because they're darker skinned than we are? But the part that makes a person vulnerable to change is when they sit down and actually read the transcripts of the situations in which they're fleeing from, and they realize that this person has human emotions. this thing has a humanity behind this darker skin, and that's what I think many people are afraid of learning the facts for.
Yeah, because then when my humanity looks into your humanity and you're looking back at me, all of a sudden all those differences start to disappear.
What a dangerous proposition.
Yeah. So who's getting in?
Melania's parents, right? They are citizens now. Maybe 10% of migrants get in. The statistics sort of go up and down every month. But it's rare. It's rare. Our zero tolerance policies don't allow for a lot of that, fair adversarial competition in courts. These are rocket dockets, they call them. They move very quickly. They now, in Tucson, at the immigration courts at the border, they have brought in judges by video conference.
Oh boy, yeah.
So
take as much of the personal away as you can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So many of the migrants who find themselves, even with the luxury of being in immigration court, many of them don't even get to see the inside of a courtroom now. They're given what's called expedited removal, which is just an immigration officer who signs a paper and is able to deport them without any judicial review.
Which is done a lot with parole hearings, by the way. And
very similar, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no judicial review over those hearings many times. Yeah. And same thing with these expedited removals at the border. Even the very fact of calling it a removal is a kind of a removal from the human reality of the consequences.
Removal to me is something you do to a car. Or or brush that you gather up out of your yard, but not a human being.
Yeah. So in 1997, we changed from having deportations and exclusions to removals. So the in the parlance of the immigration law, is someone removable? When was this alien removed? Alien is a word that they use constantly.
Yeah.
Maybe their defense attorney, their advocates will say this person, this migrant, this mother, father, child, whatever the case may be, and the government always resorts back to this alien. Right? Well,
a conversation I had with a border patrol officer down in Nogales. One of the things she was saying is we were following her and we were asking a lot of questions. What about this business of giving people labels that dehumanize them? And she said, "Oh, now the word alien is in the Bible," and of course she didn't. We didn't let her get away with that. But that is the thinking.
Yeah, it's in L. Ron Hubbard's book too. But. Different kind of aliens.
Yeah. Oh.
I don't know what to make of the linguistics of our immigration policy, but what I can tell you is it's law and not justice, and that's an important distinction. The questions of justice would determine whether something is fair or whether something is equal or whether something is distributed properly, either according to need or according to want or desire. Those are all very fair questions we would ask about whether something fits into the box of justice or not. But our current law, as far as migration, is not one of justice. It's one of preferential treatment to some and not to others, and a lack of due process for sure. These closed circuit TV hearings are really a way to separate the very real decisions these immigration judges are making from the reality of the situation. Many times the judges are in, like for example, in our immigration court in Louisiana, which is where people from Tennessee are taken. Many of those immigration judges are from Miami, and they're sitting in an office in Miami making a decision about someone in detention in Louisiana. Well, it's the psychological studies have been done many times over for 30, 40 years about how much easier it is to push the button to increase the electric jolt, or whatever the case may be, when you have that physical separation from the victim.
When I don't have to look you in the eyes. Yeah.
And the videos are very scratchy. I mean, it's like some sort of Soviet era video equipment. Like, of all the technology that we have, and we always, the president is always tweeting out videos of, night vision footage of supposed migrants running across the border and everything. We apparently have all of this video technology, but when it comes to providing some basic protection for rights in court, it's like the scratchy VHS type quality,
Yeah.
It doesn't, it isn't compatible with any kind of justice, in my opinion.
So, we know a great deal about what's wrong with what we're doing. What would it look like in a perfect world? I know we use these terms. How do we begin to turn this around? What do we do as a people to turn this around?
Yeah. I mean, I do think the visualization of what justice should be is a necessarily utopian enterprise. Because our notions of what is justice have to be based on what is a perfect world. We can't idealize or construct an idea of what justice is without considering what the best case scenario could possibly be. Because justice by its very nature is aspirational, right? It's like, what is it what values do we want to have as a society? Whether that's fairness or equality, which are very different things. Whether it's the distribution of things and stuff, and rights and benefits, and duties and obligations to people who society has treated as less than, or whether it's something that we should be treating everyone equally on. Whether it's a libertarian approach of, the rights and duties should be distributed so that they stay as far out of someone's life as possible, or whether it's a very hands-on approach in leveling the playing field. These are all really important questions that we should be asking, and I think we do have to have kind of a utopian perspective in order to understand what conceptualization of justice we want. Now, as far as what it looks like at the border, it means the deconstruction of fences, walls, things that impede the natural flow of things, of animals, humans, the air, the wind, the butterflies.
The butterflies,
I've just been devastated by the National Butterfly Center.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of white people have, because, oh my God, the poor butterflies. But, oh my God, the poor people, too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it does. It means the wholesale deconstruction of all of that. And if we're going to be spending $8 billion to build a fence, it's definitely worth it to spend $16 billion to tear it down. Whatever the cost may be. It means decarcerating people who are in prison for no other reason than, the part of the world that they were born in makes it impossible for them to live. That is justice in any formulation, whether it's based on fairness or equality or distributive justice. In any of those worldviews, the deconstruction of physical borders is important. And, the reflexive response to that is, we have to, a country is not a country without borders. That's what the president says, right? So,
why do we need countries?
Ultimately, that's the question, right? I mean, what legitimacy do we have over this land that we're sitting on right now that used to be slave land of Andrew Jackson? I mean, we don't. What superior claim of right do we have over this land than
Yeah,
the
and
natives.
of course the street that we drive on regularly is the Trail of Tears.
Yeah.
And my God, what we've done.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah.
And wow,
Yeah, thanks for this conversation. It's been
Yeah.
fun.
absolutely.